Hello, welcome to my podcast. Here we will talk about suicide with compassion and no judgment. For more information on suicide, go to understandsuicide.com. Today I have with me a good friend, someone that I met, a year and a half, maybe 2 years ago?
Yeah, 2 years.
Yeah, I think 2 years ago. I was looking for a support group here in Portland, Oregon, and this is how we met. Thank you so much, Mindy, for being with me, for talking about your loss and sharing your wisdom with us.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, Mindy lost her daughter, Kat, in March 2017, so it will be practically 3 years now.
3 years in March. It's been almost 2 years, 8 months.
Okay.
2 years.
Can you tell us a little bit about what happened?
My daughter had a perfect storm. She was 33 years old. She lost her job because of drinking, which helped her with her depression and anxiety. She felt that the medication she took, the antidepressants and the antipsychotics, weren't working, and the only thing that worked was the alcohol. She also used marijuana, and she was a bulimic besides being an alcoholic. And when she lost her job because of her drinking, her dog died like 2 weeks later. She was buying her first townhouse, and that fell through because she no longer had a job. So it was just like a total perfect storm that hit her. And I was with her when her dog died. The dog was 16 years old, and really, I think, kept her alive a couple of years because she was talking quite often about suicide. One part of me thought, I heard that old, it's not true now, but they used to say if they talk about it, they won't do it.
Yes,
so
that's a myth, actually.
It's a
People
myth.
believe that, but it's not true.
Right, and I believed it. So
You
I
did.
thought maybe she's talking about it, so she won't do it. My ex-husband, when she was, even before she was born, he talked about suicide. He's a practicing alcoholic. And he talked about suicide, but he never did it. So when she got older and started talking about suicide, I thought, well, she probably won't do it either. She did call me because she lived in Arizona while I lived in Western New York and here. And she called me maybe 6 or 7 times and always said the same thing. She said, "Mother, you're a good mother. I love you. I can't take the pain anymore. I've taken an overdose and I just want to say goodbye."
So she called you before,
6
right
or 7
after?
times.
Okay.
No, not that day.
Oh, okay.
6 or 7 times, and every time she called me, I called the police or fire department, wherever she
I
was
see.
living.
So you thought that was going on with her, and you wanted them to come and maybe do a checkup.
Yes, a wellness check. And they would come and then they would say to me that she hadn't taken anything. So she was crying for help. And here she had a psychiatrist and a psychologist. She had just finished a borderline personality, DBT, I think it's called, session. So she had that those tools that you're supposed to have numbers that you can call if you're in crisis. She had just done all of that.
So a safety plan.
The
She had
safety
it
plan.
put together. Okay.
And she would not tell me who her psychiatrist or psychologist was. And I kept saying, "Can we go together?" Because I was hoping I would get their number and then I could call them and say, "I'm watching my daughter disintegrate here. And she has all these crises, loss of job, loss of pet, loss of her new home." But
so many
she would
risk
not
factors
give me,
happening.
She wouldn't give me anybody's name, not even her friends. She was very compartmentalized. But she kept saying she didn't want to live. She didn't want to live. She didn't want to live. And when her dog died, her sister and brother and I called her or texted her every day, and
because you knew
we were
what it meant to her.
We were afraid. And several times I said, "Can I just come be with you?" "No, I'm too depressed." So she did not reach out the night that she took an overdose of her dog's pain medication. But she did write a note, but it was clear from the note that the word, the handwriting was slurred, that she was drunk. I think it was an impulsive act.
Although there was a history of mental health issues.
And she talked about, she had suicide ideation. So I don't know. She wrote a note. I wish, we think maybe she thought if I survive, I'll tear up the note. If I don't, We just have no idea what
Yeah,
happened.
there are so many questions after suicide.
But her roommate found her, and it was a Saturday morning, and police called my son, and they found the roommate had my son's phone number, and that was the day my life forever changed. That morning, my son couldn't tell me, and so he brought my older daughter over, and the two of them called me downstairs, and I was changing to go out, and they said, "Don't change, just come, put on a bathrobe and come down." And when they told me right here in the kitchen, I just collapsed on the floor, and I just, you go into shock, like you just cannot believe it happened. You just don't believe it. You don't want to believe it, So
even though I remember you told me once that she had tried before.
She had never tried before. She had threatened.
She had threatened, yes. She had told you that she would do it.
Which was a cry for help.
Yeah, of course.
And every time I called suicide prevention, the police, something, and I took it seriously. Last time she had done this, I said to her, "Catherine, if you die, I don't think I could survive a death by you." But I don't know if she heard it. She was very pro-euthanasia because, this state of Oregon has legalized
death with dignity,
it. And she felt like death would, if you have an incurable mental illness, then that you have a right to die, which I am ambivalent about that, but I was never going to tell her. I thought it was the right thing. And she said, "I know you don't agree with me, Mom." She said to me, I suggested she go to AA, and she said, "I would rather die than go to AA." So, and she did. I think everybody I've met has guilt. What could I have done differently? If I had called, if I had shown up, if I had anything. But I wouldn't say I had that much guilt. It was a normal amount, I think, because
you had tried, and
I had tried, but
you had listened to her call for help.
Yes, and I had talked to her about it. But I did have guilt. But I wouldn't say it wasn't what ruled me. What ruled me was just this tremendous grief. I really didn't care if I lived. Probably for the first year, I was very ambivalent about living. I didn't want to die by suicide, but I didn't care if I died. I just felt like then I would be closer to her.
Well, it is one of, losing a father or your mother, your parents, is the natural course of life. But when you lose a child, that is the hardest grief to have.
She was a wonderful daughter. She was a terrific person. And I did get cancer, breast cancer, 10 months after her death. And I believe she helped me to find it because I was looking at her picture and I said, "You're in my heart, Catherine." And I put my hand on my heart and felt this lump.
Wow.
And then went right away to the doctor, and it was cancerous, and I had a mastectomy. And I feel as though I was so devastated and didn't really care about whether I lived or died. And the fact that it's in my left breast, where my heart is.
Yeah, it's very symbolic.
I think it was very symbolic for me. And I saw my oncologist in March I have treatments every 6 months, like chemo treatments. And this oncologist said to me, "How are you doing?" And she was asking, like, holistically, "How are you doing?" And I said, "My daughter, the second anniversary of my daughter's death is coming up in a week, and I am a mess."
Yes, and anniversaries are really hard.
Really hard.
Yes.
And this oncologist put her hand on my shoulder, and she said, "The way you talk about your daughter, she sounds so terrific. I wish I had known her." Aww. And that was like the nicest thing anybody could say to me, that I wish I could have known your daughter. So I want people to know my daughter.
Yes.
What I know now about other people who've lost loved ones to suicide is we want to talk about them. And
was it hard for you at first? Because there is a stigma associated with suicide that makes it so hard for people to open up. People usually don't. Did it happen to you at all within your family or with your friends?
I never had a suicide in my family before. But my brother had a friend who died by suicide like 35 years ago, but I had only met her a couple of times. But I felt sad that she had died. I didn't feel the stigma. My daughter struggled with mental illness, with brain disease for a long time. And she always talked about suicide the entire time. So I felt as though I had her on borrowed time. I didn't believe she would do it.
Yeah.
But
it's so hard to believe that anyone would, right?
Right. But I felt like I had to soak her up. The very last time I saw her, which was 7 days before she died, was the day her dog died. I was with her, and then we went out to dinner. And now in hindsight, when you look, there's a part of me that maybe thought, I wonder if I'll see her again. Because she said for 13 years when her dog died, she would die. So that last time I saw her, I just tried to commit her to memory. But I didn't even have this awareness until a year or two after she died. So it was unconscious, memorize everything about her. And when I dropped her off back at her apartment, I watched her walk up to her apartment and walk in, and that's the last time I ever saw her. And I can still see her in my mind's eye. She said to me many times, "Don't ever stop talking about mental illness. Take the stigma away, Mom."
Good.
She said, "People are mean to me. People are unkind.
They
People
don't
call
understand.
me crazy."
Yeah.
So the stigma was on her. And
about mental illness.
About mental illness.
Yeah.
And she would have a boyfriend. She was very pretty, so she had is easy to get a boyfriend. Then her mental illness would really come out, and she would sabotage the relationship.
Yes.
And the boyfriends would say to her, "You're crazy," and she used to say to me, "Mom, I don't want to be crazy. I don't want to be crazy. Mom, I don't want to be crazy."
Yeah.
I think her dog was something, so close to her.
It was one of the triggers,
She
for
wrote
sure.
here, unconditional love, and
it's amazing that you didn't experience that, because it's so rare to hear from someone who loses a person to suicide said, "No, I didn't experience the stigma."
Yeah.
So when you and I know you, and I know how openly you talk about this, so maybe that helps too, because sometimes I feel that the more you try to hide it, the more you feed the stigma.
I have 4 children, and she was my third, and 2 are biological and 2 are adopted. And the 2 adopted are Chinese and Filipino. So I'm already used to having a blended family, and that my children are all my children. It doesn't matter how I came by them.
Sure.
And they alternated, biological, adopted, adopted, and they were all just the same. But I was used to people staring at my adopted children, because they're a different race, and they would stare. So I was already used to not caring what people think.
Okay. And I'm sure your attitude of openness also helps.
Yes, but nobody thought I had adopted children. People thought I was married 4 times, because I had a blonde child, a black-haired, a blonde-haired, a black-haired. So people always said, "Were you married 4 times?"
Oh my God, this woman.
I know. So I was already used to not minding what people think.
Yes.
But I refuse to have any shame about my daughter's death. I'm proud of my daughter. I'm not going to say it was a courageous act. I think it was an act of a desperate person who
it's an act of someone who is in pain.
Act of a desperate person who was in tremendous pain. But I'm extremely proud of my daughter for everything that she did. She lived as long as she could, and I wish.
And as well as she could.
Yeah. And I have so many wonderful memories. In the beginning, I couldn't remember any of them. All I could remember was how she died.
Wow.
And I went round and round
It does take time, doesn't it? Because death takes over.
The death takes over. How it happened, how could it have happened, how you could have
done differently, yes.
And I couldn't think of anything else. Now I'm beginning to remember
the
those
good
wonderful
things. Yes.
good times.
What about your family? Do you find that, how did they react? Did they react? Because sometimes I have heard from families who even had quarrels and arguments because one doesn't even want to admit that it was suicide. The other one sees it differently. There is sometimes blaming. You were not good enough, or you're not a good sister or brother. And how did your family react to the suicide?
Well, I have 3 other children. One of them has really openly grieved. She hasn't gone to my daughter's older sister. She hasn't gone to any kind of group therapy or anything, but she has done some reading about suicide. She is She's talked about suicide. She's gone to the Out of Darkness walks with the American Foundation of Suicide Prevention,
which happens
twice,
every year,
and
right?
she's going to do it again this Saturday with me. And so she's been involved, and we talk about her sister. And she, in the beginning, she was angry. You know,
which is normal.
How dare my sister? Was like my closest person. We had each other's secrets, and who am I going to tell my secrets to now? You know, so she was.
It's a great loss.
She was devastated. She got a tattoo on my daughter's the first year of her death. She got a tattoo, or maybe it was my daughter's birthday after, on her foot of two little birds. Like sister birds, and it's got the suicide semicolon.
Yeah, the
which
semicolon.
Is to
yeah,
pause.
that's the symbol. Yeah,
she's got that symbol on there, and it's such a beautiful, beautiful tattoo. It's right there. Do you see that?
Oh, I see. Yeah. We're looking at a shrine that she put together for her daughter. It looks beautiful. Yeah.
So, my one son has not really much mentioned it at all, and
it's harder for him to open up.
Yes, I don't think he's even really thought about it much. Like he's in such denial.
Oh.
And the other son.
And do you talk to him? What does he say?
We do talk about him. He just sort of changes the subject. My older son has been devastated, but he talks about it. He's cried. All of them have cried with me. But we've all grieved totally differently, you know.
Yes,
it's so
we all
interesting
do. Yeah.
how we all grieve very differently.
But it sounds like your family at least talks about it, because some families won't. And I've even met families that deny the suicide, all of it. They change. In Brazil, here it's different, but in Brazil, the stigma is huge about suicide, and even sometimes you'll see the cause of death as accident or something like that, and families ask to not mention suicide for various reasons. Are you religious at all? Because that's one of the things that sometimes helps. How does that work for you?
I was angry at God.
Yeah.
Because I could see it happening. You know, I could see her disintegrating. And I prayed and prayed and prayed. I started praying a rosary, which I hadn't prayed for many years. Maybe the last month of her life, every day. And when she died, I stopped praying it. So I was treating God in a way like Santa Claus. Because I was saying, please help my daughter, please help my daughter, please help my daughter. And when she died, I said, you didn't help my daughter. So I haven't given up my faith, which is, I've had deep faith since I was a young child, but I'm grappling with my faith. I've read a book by Rabbi Kushner. I read it 30 years ago when it came out. I had no reason to read it. It was just a bestseller, and I liked it then. But
do you remember the name?
Yes, When Bad Things Happen to
Oh,
Good
yes,
People.
I've read that. Yes, it's wonderful.
It's wonderful.
Yeah.
And there's also a
Very
YouTube
moving.
where you can hear him talking about it. It's really wonderful. What he says is, it's not why do bad things happen to good people. It's when bad things happen to good people. Because bad things do happen to good people. So what it says was, God cannot keep bad things from happening. God can't. So it changes your conception of God, you know. But what he says at the end of the book is, God shows up in the grieving to carry you when you're suffering. So God is there in your suffering.
Yeah.
And I have felt God there.
You have.
I have felt God there. And then he says, also God brings people into your life that you would never have met who console you. And that's how I met you. I would never, ever have met you if my daughter hadn't died and your father hadn't died. I never would have met you.
Sure. Yeah.
And so we've consoled each other, and here we are, friends. We would have never even met or been
That's
friends.
True. Yeah.
So I see that while God couldn't keep my daughter alive, but God has shown me a lot of mercy and love, huge amount of love. I felt it from my higher power, from God, but also from the people like you and family members. And one friend who wasn't particular, she was an acquaintance, and she has no children. And she called me every single day, almost the first year, for about 11 months, every single
amazing,
day.
yeah.
And some days I didn't answer because I was in such grief, and she would leave a message every single day.
Just to be present.
Just
say,
to be present. I'm
here and I care.
And in first I wouldn't answer, but after, I don't know how long, a few weeks or something, I would answer, and I'd just cry and cry, and she would just let me talk. So where did she get that? To me, that is like God, that she got... She has a busy life, and how she could call me every single day.
Yeah, and it's you know what you just said brought back to me. I have a website, understandsuicide.com, and one of the things that I say there is don't wait, because we usually say, oh, if you feel sad, give me a call, or if you're grieving and things are too hard, if you need something, let me know. No, don't do that. Call them. Be proactive. That's very important, because it shows them that you care. And people, when we are depressed and when we go through such a difficult loss, we don't have the energy to call anyone, right?
Anyone who said to me, call me anytime, I
never did.
Never,
did you?
Never did. Never once.
I mean, who does?
No,
who does?
Never once.
So be proactive.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that really can make a difference.
And I had friends bring me food. They brought me breakfast, lunch, and dinner for probably the first 4 or 5 weeks that she died. Every meal that was brought to me, because I didn't want to eat. In the beginning, I couldn't sleep. I don't think I slept for 4 days, and I couldn't eat. I was like a zombie. You know, I was. So finally, they said, some friends said, you have to eat. You know, you have to eat. You have to come back and be in the living, you know.
But they didn't say, if you feel like eating, give me a call, right?
No, they didn't. They
it's very
the
different.
Food. They knocked on my door.
Yeah. Leslie, which Leslie, just so the listener knows, she used to be the facilitator of the group that we used to go to. And I remember one of the things she used to say is, be proactive, you know, call, bring food, do something practical, offer help, take the kids to school, go to the grocery and buy them food, or do something to help, but don't wait for them to call you, because nobody will.
No,
nobody will. So what else helped you?
Well, I read a lot of books. So, some people can't read. I read everything I could get my hands on.
I did the same.
Everything on grief, all of Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's books. I read John Holland. I read the Long Island Madam. You know, I was trying to communicate with my daughter on the other side.
Understand, yes.
I read religious books. I read C.S. Lewis on a book on when his wife died. He wrote a book on grief. You know, anything. But I didn't really retain it. I did highlight anything that spoke to me, and I read. Now I'm rereading them. So I think in the last 2 years I've read over 200 books. But I didn't necessarily retain a lot. It was just comforting. It brought solace to me. I read everything I could get my hands on suicide, and there's a lot out there now, so I'm still reading. I understand because I did the same. I started reading compulsively, specifically about suicide, because it was something so distant, so foreign to me. I wanted to understand, and for me it was really, really helpful. And as you said, I don't remember much of what I read, but at that time, because it's traumatic, and any trauma will affect your memory, so it's normal that you don't remember. I actually couldn't remember, even if I had been to the funeral of my dad's funeral for a long time. I couldn't remember. So that's how bad it affects you. But I understand what you're saying. I read so much. It gives you hope. That's what it
helps
did for
connect.
Me. And somebody told me to listen to music, but I couldn't listen to music because it reminded me of my daughter. Because, you know, she was 33 years old, so there was a lot of music from the 70s, 80s, 90s now, and it just made me burst into tears. I couldn't listen.
Yeah, some things are more triggering than others.
It was very triggering for me. So then I settled on Christian music. That was because she did not go to church. So that I could listen to it.
Because that was totally not triggering.
Totally not her.
It's the opposite.
That was the only music, and I still am listening to it.
you still listening to gospel
all
music?
these gospel music.
Well, it's something else that you have done, and I've always appreciated that. And just so the listener understands, I'm here looking at some cards, and I think for grief in general, even if it's not suicide grief, rituals can be very meaningful, and it does help for families to remember the deceased and the person who left. And Mindy, she has chosen and bought a card for every year, right? For her birthday. And I would like, if you don't mind, to read one of them. I know that you just bought one for this year.
I bought one for next year. Her
for
birthday's
next year.
in July.
Okay.
Her birthday's in
So
July.
if you don't mind, and if you could
I'm going to read the first one.
Okay.
Because I bought the first card. She was going to be 34 in July, and she died in March.
Okay.
And I bought the card maybe in December. You know, I bought it. It was so her. She was a hiker and a camper, and so the picture has boots on it.
Okay.
And it says,
a message. Yeah.
It says on the front, "My baby is not a baby anymore. She's a woman making her own way in life and carving her own path in the world. I'm so proud of the way you live your life, fearlessly, confidently, and with a spirit that's all your own." And then
beautiful message.
So when she died, my sister came from Canada to stay with me the first week, I just kept saying, I wish I'd given her this card. I wish she could have known how proud I was of her. And she said, "Mindy, give it to her on her birthday, just like you were going to." So
she gave you the idea for the card.
She did. So what I wrote was, "Honey, I can't see you today, not like I could last year or all the other years when we celebrated your birthday together. But there were many years when we were apart on your birthday and we spoke by phone. I'd sing you happy birthday on your voicemail and you'd call to thank me once you'd awakened. So this 34th birthday of yours is yet another way to celebrate your special day together. We are still together because now you're in my heart, spirit, and soul. You are with me always, dear. I found this card before you died, several months before, and I'm pretty sure I told you that I bought you the perfect birthday card. It really says everything I love about you. You are indomitable, and your spirit lives on in all our hearts. With much love, Mom."
Thank you so much for sharing, Mindy, and thank you so much for sharing your story. I'm really glad to see that you are doing better, and you're searching for help. You're still doing your weekly meetings with the suicide prevention and suicide support group.
Bi-monthly meetings.
Bi-monthly?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. So bi-monthly.
It was weekly. Now it's bi-monthly.
No, it has changed. Just to end the interview, I want to thank you for your generosity and your openness. And this is why I created this podcast, is to talk about suicide and to fight the stigma that surrounds this theme. And I know that makes it so hard for us who grieve this kind of loss. Do you have anything else that you would like to say, or what would you say to someone who has just lost a person, a loved one, to suicide? Is there anything that you would like to say to them?
You know, I have met, since my daughter died, so many grieving people. And I have surprisingly met many people who are themselves suicidal. And I think it's so interesting that I am not suicidal, and I haven't been, but that I had a daughter that I lost to suicide. And yet people who are struggling themselves call me to share with me, as though I might understand their pain. And I try to understand their pain. I see my daughter in each one of them, and I just hear my daughter saying, "Listen to them, Mother, listen to them and love them." Oh, wow. So that is the surprising thing to me, is how many people have reached out to me who themselves are suffering and have suicidal ideation. But for people who've lost loved ones to suicide, what helped me best or most was talking to other people who've lost loved ones to suicide. And if somebody said to me, "I have a sister who died by suicide," or "My friend has a mother," I would say, "Could I have their phone number?" And I would call them, and I would say, "I just lost my daughter, and can you tell me about your loss?"
Yes.
And I've met people all around the world. And there was a woman who lost her daughter 2 weeks after I lost mine, who lives in Toronto. And we've become good friends, and I've never even seen her. I've met people everywhere. And so I reached out as a way of coping with my own grief.
But that's a great point, because some people don't reach out because they have shame, or because they think that they're not going to be understood or listened to. And it does help, doesn't it?
I didn't reach out to anyone who said, call me if you want.
Yes.
Not one of those
people.
Yes.
Let's end on that note. If you want to help someone who is grieving, show up.
Right.
Show up, call them, bring them food, do whatever you can, but don't expect them to pick up the phone and give you a call, because they won't.
No.
Thank you so much, Mindy.
You're
welcome. You so much for your time, and thank you, listener, for listening to the podcast. Thank you for listening to my podcast. For more information on suicide, go to understandsuicide.com.